Good evening, everyone. Welcome to One United Church of Christ's Good Friday service. If you are joining us online, there is a bulletin to follow along. If you'd like to, go to the website oneucc.org and go to the worship tab and worship online, and you'll be able to see the bulletin. I just want to thank Pam and Christy and Sandy for participating in this evening's service. Christy last minute because Judy was not feeling well today, so thank you, Christy, for filling in. After the service, we will depart in silence, taking with us our thoughts and our feelings and our discernment. Take it home with you. Consider what this night means to all of us as Christians in this world. But the story continues on Easter morn. So come back Sunday morning at 10:30 and join us for worship. Let us prepare our hearts for worship. You can join me in the call to worship. God is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?
God is the strength of my life, whom shall I dread?
I am seeking your presence, O God.
Do not abandon me to my foes. There are people who hate me. There are things that control me. There are places that frighten me.
Trust in God. Stand fast and have courage. I invite you to rise if you're able, and let us sing together the first hymn.
Soul
While Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, accompanied by a great crowd with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the chief priests and elders of the people. Judas had arranged to give them a signal, whomever I embrace is the one, he had said. Take hold of him. He immediately went over to Jesus and said, Shalom, Rabbi, and embraced him. And Jesus said to Judas,
Friend, just do what you're here to do.
At that moment, the crowd surrounded them, laid hands on Jesus, and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those who accompanied Jesus drew a sword and slashed in the high priest's attendant, cutting off an ear. Jesus said,
Put your sword back where it belongs. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. Don't you think I can call on my Abba God to provide over 12 legions of angels at a moment's notice? But then, how would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen this way? Am I a robber that you have arrived with swords and clubs to arrest me? Every day I sat teaching in the temple precincts, yet you never arrested me.
And all this happened in fulfillment of the writings of the prophets. Then all the disciples deserted Jesus and fled.
Those who had seized Jesus led him off to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the religious scholars and elders had convened. Peter followed at a distance as far as the high priest's residence. Going inside, Peter sat down with the guards to await the outcome. The chief priests, which the whole Sanhedrin were busy trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death. They discovered none, despite the many false witnesses who took the stand.
Finally, two came forward who stated, This man has declared, I can destroy God's sanctuary and rebuild it in 3 days. The high priest rose and addressed Jesus. Have you no answer? What about this testimony leveled against you? But Jesus remained silent. The high priest then said to him, I order you to tell us under oath before the living God whether or not you are the Messiah, the firstborn of God. And Jesus replied,
You have said it yourself, but I tell you, soon you will see the chosen one seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven.
At this, the high priest tore his robes and said, Blasphemy! What further need do we have of witnesses? You yourselves have heard the blasphemy. What is your verdict? They responded, He deserves death. Then they spat at his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped Jesus, saying, Play the prophet for us, Messiah. Who struck you?
While this was happening, Peter was sitting in the courtyard. One of the attendants came over and said, You were with Jesus the Galilean too, weren't you? But Peter denied it in front of everyone. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. And when Peter went out to the gate, another attendant saw him and said to those nearby, This one was with Jesus of Nazareth. Again, he cursed and denied it. I don't know him.
A little while later, some bystanders came over to Peter and said, You certainly are one of them. Even your accent gives you away. At that, Peter began cursing and swore, I don't know the man. Just then a rooster began to crow. And Peter remembered the prediction Jesus has made. Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Peter went out and cried bitterly.
At daybreak, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took formal action against Jesus to put him to death. They bound him and led him away to be handed over to Pilate, the governor.
When he saw that Jesus had been condemned, Judas, who had betrayed Jesus, felt remorse. He took the 30 pieces of silver back to the chief priests and elders and said, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood." "What's that to us?" they answered. "That's your affair." So Judas flung the money into the sanctuary and left. Then he went off and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the silver, observing, "It's against the law to deposit this in the temple treasury, since it is blood money." After some discussion, they used the money to buy Potter's Field as a cemetery for foreigners. This is why that field, even today, is called Blood Field.
Well, then Jesus was arraigned before Pontius Pilate, the governor, who questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus replied,
"You say that I am."
Yet when Jesus was accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no reply. Pilate said to Jesus, "Surely you can hear how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus did not answer Pilate on a single count, much to the governor's surprise.
Now, on the occasion of a festival, the governor was accustomed to release one prisoner, whomever the crowd would designate. At the time, they were holding a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when the crowd gathered, Pilate asked him, "Which one do you wish me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, the so-called Messiah?" Pilate knew, of course, that it was out of jealousy that they handed Jesus over. While Pilate was still presiding on the bench, his wife sent him a message.
"Have nothing to do with that innocent man. I had a dream about him last night, which has been troubling me all day long."
But the chief priests and the elders convinced the crowds that they should ask for Barabbas and have Jesus put to death. So when the governor asked them, "Which one do you wish me to release for you?" they all cried, "Crowd?"
Pilate said to them, "Then what am I to do with Jesus, the so-called Messiah?"
"Crucify him."
"Why? What crime has he committed?" Pilate asked, but they only shouted louder,
"Crucify him." Pilate finally realized that he was getting nowhere with this. In fact, a riot was breaking out. Pilate called for water and washed his hands in front of the crowd, declaring as he did so, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is all yours." At that, Pilate released Barabbas to them. Pilate had Jesus whipped with a cat o' nine tails and then handed him over to be crucified. The governor's soldiers took Jesus inside the praetorium and assembled the whole cohort around him. They stripped off his clothes and wrapped him in a scarlet military cloak. Weaving a crown out of thorns, they pressed it onto his head and stuck a reed in his right hand. And then they began to mock Jesus by dropping to their knees, saying, "All hail, King of the Jews!" They also spat at him. And afterward, they took the hold of the reed and struck Jesus on the head. Finally, when they had finished mocking him, they stripped him of the cloak, dressed him back in his own clothes, and led him off to crucifixion. On their way out, they met a Syrian named Simon, whom they pressed into service to carry the cross. And upon arriving at a site called Golgotha, which means skull place, they gave Jesus a drink of wine mixed with a narcotic herb, which Jesus tasted but refused to drink. Once they had nailed Jesus to the cross, they divided his clothes among them by rolling dice. And then they sat down and they kept watch over him. Above his head, they put the charge against him in writing. "This is Jesus, King of the Jews."
2 robbers were crucified along with Jesus, one at his right and one on his left. People going by insulted Jesus, shaking their heads and saying,
"So you are the one who was going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days? Save yourself, why don't you? Come down off that cross if you are God's own." The religious authorities also joined in the jeering. "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. So he's the King of Israel. Let's see him come down from that cross, and then we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now. After all, he claimed to be God's own. The robbers who had been crucified with Jesus jeered at him in the same way. At noon, a darkness fell over the whole land until about 3 p.m. And at that hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice,
Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?
This made some of the bystanders who heard it remark, he is calling on for Elijah. One of them hurried off and got a sponge. He soaked the sponge in cheap wine and, sticking it on a reed, tried to make Jesus drink. The others said, leave him alone. Let's see whether Elijah comes to his rescue.
Once again, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, and then he gave up his spirit. Let us join together. You may stay seated in the first verse of Were You There?
Suddenly, the curtain in front of the Holy of Holies was ripped in half from top to bottom. The earth quaked, boulders were split, and tombs were opened. Many bodies of holy ones who had fallen asleep were raised. After Jesus' resurrection, they came out of their tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many.
The centurion and his cohort, who were standing guard over Jesus' body, were terror-stricken at seeing the earthquake and all that was happening, and said, clearly, this was God's own.
A group of women were present, looking on from a distance. These were the same women who had followed Jesus from Galilee as ministers to him. Among them were Mary of Magdala, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children.
When evening fell, a wealthy man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had become a disciple of Jesus, came to request the body of Jesus. Pilate issued an order for its release. Taking the body, Joseph wrapped it in fresh linen and laid it in his own tomb, which had been hewn out of rock. Then Joseph rolled a huge stone over the entrance of the tomb and went away. But Mary of Magdala and the other Mary remained sitting there, facing the tomb.